This flight became a life-threatening crisis in seconds.
An explosion rocks Southwest Flight 1380.
The vibration was so severe, I was not able to see any of the instruments.
Throughout the airplane, it was just screams of terror.
The cabin depressurizes.
I could feel the air being sucked out of my lungs.
Everything became very, very hot, then very, very cold at the same time.
As the pilots fight to regain control of their airplane,
You still got it!
flight attendants make a horrifying discovery. Southwest Airlines Flight 1380 is boarding for a trip to Dallas, Texas. Andrew Needham is a firefighter and paramedic on his way home after a family vacation in New York City.
We took a trip kind of as a year end to the completion of my paramedic certification school. And so we decided that it would be a family getaway.
Row 14, just on the right.
Jennifer Reardon is returning home from a business trip to New York. 144 passengers settle in to this sold-out flight. In the cockpit, the flight crew prepares the Boeing 737 for departure.
Let's start the pre-flight procedures.
I'm on it.
Captain Tammy Jo Schultz has been flying 737s for 24 years.
Homeward bound.
She's no ordinary flight commander.
Tammy Jo Schultz. She is a former naval aviator, flew during the Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm, and also flew aerial firefighting aircraft before joining Southwest.
First Officer Darren Ellisor has been with Southwest for 10 years. He's a former Air Force major.
I love to fly. We get to see the most amazing sights and be in a different place every time you go fly.
Your leg?
This one's mine.
It's the second day of a 4-day pairing for the crew. First Officer Ellisor will be the pilot flying this leg.
I was starting my day in the cockpit, ready to go fly. It was a beautiful day in LaGuardia, actually. The weather was fantastic.
The crew flew in earlier today from Nashville. The 4-hour trip to Dallas will be their second and final flight of the day. Flight attendant Rachel Fernheimer started with Southwest Airlines just 2 years ago.
I love my job. I would have to say it's the people. My favorite thing is to just be there for them and talk them through what they need me to, or even just to have a laugh with them or cry with them.
Rachel is working with her colleague Shanique Mallory. At 10:42 a.m., Flight 1380 takes off on time.
B1. Rotate.
Two turbofan engines power the Boeing 737 into the sky.
The airplane was almost to maximum weight. The gas tanks were near full capacity. And when you're in a heavy airplane, it does affect your performance. It makes the airplane less responsive.
As Flight 1380 climbs to cruising altitude, controllers at LaGuardia hand the flight over to New York area controllers.
Southwest 1380, contact New York Center, 133.47.
Copy that, 1380.
20 minutes after takeoff.
Thank you.
Everything changed.
What the?
We had a very large bang. We had multiple warnings going off in the cockpit and a very severe vibration throughout the entire plane.
This flight went from being an absolutely routine flight into Dallas into a life-threatening crisis in seconds.
The plane depressurizes.
I could feel the air being sucked out of my lungs. Immediately, it was very disorienting. It was something that I've never had in my entire flying career.
First Officer Ellisor struggles to control the aircraft as it banks steeply to the left.
I immediately grabbed the yoke to stop the roll.
You still got it!
I was not able to see any of the engine instruments because the vibration was so severe. It was just a blur of colors. And so I can't see anything.
You still got it.
Luckily, it was a clear day, a very clear horizon, and I was able to roll out of the bank and recover the airplane.
Okay, wings are back to level. You're looking good.
At 32,000 feet, the pilots need to determine what's wrong with their plane.
There's a lot of vibration. The climb rate decreases. The engine RPM was rolling back. They very quickly knew that they had an engine problem.
Emergency descent.
First Officer Ellisor reduces engine power and begins a steep descent.
I know that we have a pressurization problem. I know we have some sort of engine problem. I don't know what else is going on, but I know we need to start on our way down.
Southwest 1380 has an engine fire and is descending.
Captain Schultz updates New York Air Traffic Control. Smoke in the cockpit could indicate an engine fire.
Tammy Jo thought it was smoke. I did not think it was smoke at the time. Explosive decompression causes a condensation in the air, which basically looks like a fog.
All right, Southwest 1380. Okay, where would you like to go? To which airport?
Give us a vector to your nearest airfield.
Okay.
We knew we needed to land the airplane as soon as practical. I looked on my map display and saw 2 airfield circles that were very close, except they were very small airports. They may not have the appropriate fire and rescue crews there. They may not have a long enough runway for us.
First Officer Ellisor sees another option 70 miles away. It's an airport he knows well.
I just pointed on my map to Philadelphia, and she saw it immediately.
Philadelphia.
Flight 1380 is now falling fast. Unsure of what's wrong with their aircraft, the pilots update the passengers.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We're going into Philadelphia. Remain seated. Thank you. Tell you what, I'm going to take it.
All right.
As commander of the flight, Captain Schultz takes control.
Whatever she told me to do, I was going to do. She wanted to fly and wanted me to run the checklist, and I was fine with that.
First Officer Ellisor begins checklists for a severe engine failure or fire. The problem engine, engine 1 on the left side, must be shut down before it can do any more damage.
Auto throttle. If engaged, disengage.
That checklist calls for multiple steps.
Disengaged.
You retard the throttle for the affected engine, and then you have a fire warning switch, which you will pull.
It's too easy to have something get overlooked in an emergency. Checklists are designed to be very efficient, also ensure that the airplane remains in a safe state.
Flight 1380 is 10 minutes away from Philadelphia International Airport and closing fast. Controllers in Philadelphia try to guide the flight to safety.
Southwest 1380, are you coming right in or extended final?
As the plane drops below 10,000 feet, the crew no longer needs oxygen masks to breathe.
Extended final.
The captain requests a longer approach, so she and Elisor have time to finish their checklists.
We got a couple of checklists to run. I want to talk to the girls as well. We don't know what happened back there.
You go talk to the girls. I've got everything here.
You guys there? Hello?
I rang the flight attendants and I didn't get any answer. I didn't know what was going on back there.
I got no reply from the back.
I'm really starting to get worried, and I was so concerned that I was ready to get up to see what's going on back there.
Before First Officer Elisor can investigate, there's a call from the cabin.
Hello?
The window is open and somebody is out the window!
Flight 1380 is just 20 minutes into a 4-hour flight from New York to Dallas, Texas. Suddenly, crisis strikes.
There's a very, very loud noise that is repeating over and over again, like a big, loud pounding of the aircraft. I didn't know what was happening.
It's metal on metal, shearing, grinding, a noise that I hope I never have to hear again.
I didn't know if it was going to be heavy turbulence, if it was something wrong with the plane, and I knew that something was not right.
The cabin is rapidly decompressing as the pressurized air inside the cabin rushes to escape to the low-pressure atmosphere outside.
What happens is the air in your lungs gets pulled out as well, so you exhale a lot, and it's very surprising to you.
Passengers and crew need oxygen masks to help them breathe. One passenger uses his phone to film the chaos in the cabin.
It was just screams of terror throughout the cabin of the airplane. The noise was just immense. The shaking was violent.
What's happening? Jump seats!
I see Shanique. I didn't have time to really take a moment to look around before I was telling her to quickly take the jump seat. My eyes got very heavy. Everything became very, very hot, then very, very cold at the same time.
As the warm air that the airplane was making is evacuated, and the fact that it's now 50 below zero outside, it gets very cold very, very quickly.
I could just feel a lack of oxygen surrounding me. You just have to make sure that you are getting oxygen. I was able to take my first good breath of oxygen before going out into the cabin without even thinking.
The cabin crew checks on the passengers row by row. It's so noisy that it's nearly impossible to communicate.
I looked every single one of them in the eye and I just said, "You're going to be okay. We are going to make it. I'm here." And at that point, we didn't even know if that was true.
At row 14, the flight attendant is stopped cold.
We had a passenger that was partially out of the aircraft. Her seatbelt was the only thing that was holding her into the plane at that point because everything from the waist up was outside of the plane.
We're gonna be okay.
When an aircraft depressurizes, all of that air is going to come out this now hole that was a window in the side of the airplane, and it's an immense amount of force.
We're gonna be okay.
Passenger Jennifer Reardon has been pulled partway out of the plane.
I was trying to pull Jennifer back into the plane. I remember saying out loud, "It's okay. We have you. You're gonna be okay." But I just wanted her to somehow know that we were with her.
It's okay. It's okay. You're gonna be okay. Help me!
Passenger Andrew Needham, a firefighter and paramedic, acts instinctively.
The thought process that was going through my head was that there was a passenger in need, and I was there to provide assistance.
Andrew Needham joins fellow passenger Tim McGinty in the struggle to pull Jennifer Reardon in.
My immediate reaction was to just reach in and grab for whatever I could, and I was able to grab onto Mrs. Reardon's pants. I was unable to get any leverage.
As passengers struggle to save Jennifer Reardon, the pilots are unaware of what's happening in the cabin.
You guys there? Hello?
They were actually trying to call us, but we were unable to hear that they were trying to do so.
I got no reply from the back.
Finally, flight attendant Shanique Mallory tries to make contact with the pilots.
A window is open and somebody is out the window.
Everything pretty much just stopped. It's not something that you're prepared to hear at all. Tammy Jo and I just looked at each other in basically shock and disbelief.
Okay, we're coming down.
The life of a passenger is in grave danger.
You want the airplane on the ground, you want it stopped, and you want medical people on board to help.
The pilots must get Flight 1380 on the ground as soon as possible. 6,000 feet over Pennsylvania, Southwest Flight 1380 has lost its left engine and suffered a rapid decompression.
Is everyone else still in their seats strapped down?
Everybody is still in their seats.
But now, the pilots face another terrifying problem.
We've tried to help get her in. I don't know what her situation is. The window is completely out.
Passengers are still struggling to pull Jennifer Reardon inside the cabin.
We were pulling with everything we had. We weren't getting anywhere.
The big factor for the passengers was that they went into very high energy air. It's a 300+ mile an hour wind. They would be subjected to brutal forces.
Slow it down to 210 knots right now.
In the cockpit, First Officer Ellisor has thought of a way he can help with Reardon's rescue.
I turned to Tammy Jo and I said we needed to slow down to 210 knots. And I knew that the speed of the aircraft was actually the thing that was preventing the people in the back from getting that passenger back in the plane.
We got her! We got her!
First Officer Ellisor's hunch pays off. The slower speed allows rescuers to pull the passenger back in.
The pilots reduced speed, and it was only at that point where we were able to pull her back in.
Jennifer Reardon's condition is dire.
There was no signs of life. You know, I felt for a pulse and started chest compressions.
It was never a sense of, is she still with us? It was a, she's with us, what can we continue to do to try to keep it this way?
Let's get her turned in.
The pilots are doing everything they can to save Reardon. Philadelphia Airport is still 30 miles away.
We knew that we needed to get on the ground as fast as we could. Everything was time critical.
I see a lady come help us, a nurse, and Andrew, who is a EMT and firefighter, was starting to do compressions. I knew that they were able to handle the situation.
Can we have medical meet us at the runway? We have injured passengers.
Injured passengers, okay. And is your plane physically on fire?
No, it's not on fire.
But parts that are missing. They say there's a hole and someone went out.
Sorry, there was a hole and someone went out?
Yes.
Southwest 1380, it doesn't matter. We'll work it out there. The airport's just off to your right.
Flight 1380 descends to 3,000 feet.
All right, set flaps to 5.
Still 20 miles away from the airport, the pilots prepare for landing.
You fly at a higher speed with flaps 5. She had less drag and less lift being produced out of the flaps.
As an ex-fighter pilot, Captain Schultz knows how speed will give her more control.
The captain elected to use a reduced flap setting and a higher approach speed so that she was guaranteed in her mind a higher level of controllability.
Flaps 5, are you sure? How about just 15? It's something we know.
Tammy Jo initially asked for a flaps 5 landing. I question this because a flaps 15 landing is what we normally would do in a single engine situation.
The captain is the final authority. She had been flying the airplane, so she knew how the airplane felt, and so she said, well, we're going to land with flaps 5.
Give me a speed for flaps 5.
148.
There's no guidance in the manuals for a flaps 5 single-engine landing. The pilots need to calculate the right airspeed for the maneuver.
148, 60 plus 20, 180.
The only thing I knew was a flaps 15 speed, and I added 20 knots. Probably that was too much, but a little bit of extra speed is better than being slow.
At an altitude of just 1,000 feet and 3 miles from Philadelphia International Airport, the pilots prepare for an emergency landing. In the cabin, 2 passengers are still trying to revive Jennifer Reardon.
I start seeing, trees and grass very, very quickly. I realized that we were landing soon and we were landing very fast.
Keep going!
The thought that crossed my mind was, why am I not bracing? But at the same time, I didn't want to give up.
Andrew continued to do compressions. I just remember looking outside, turning around, and just screaming.
Everybody, heads down, stay down.
And I walked a few rows at a time and showed the passengers their brace positions. Then once I realized we were landing, much sooner than anticipated, I started very quickly running to the front of the plane to try to get in my jump seat.
Southwest 1380, runway 27 left, cleared to land.
27 left, cleared to land, Southwest 1380.
It's seconds before touchdown. Flight 1380 is flying towards the runway at breakneck speed.
The approach speed was about 50 miles an hour faster than a traditional 737 landing because of the reduced flap setting.
Speed brake.
Armed with the green light.
The pilots are unsure of the damage to the plane. They're making a high-speed approach with the reverse thrust from only one engine to slow them down. They might not have enough runway to stop safely.
50 feet.
The fate of 144 passengers hangs in the balance.
We were coming in much faster than normal. I anticipated the landing was going to be rough.
Anything could happen to this plane right now. We don't know the damage. Is there going to be an explosion?
Flight 1380 races towards an emergency landing at Philadelphia International Airport.
30 feet.
Captain Schultz is a veteran Navy pilot. She's landed F-18 Hornets in war zones. But this is a landing unlike any other.
10.
We did not want to do a go-around. We wanted to make sure we were on the ground as fast as possible so that we could get medical attention to our injured passengers.
I was not able to make it to a jump seat before I could feel the wheels touching down. I braced myself with the passengers' help of holding on to me.
Speed brakes up.
The thrust reverser on their only engine deploys. If the reverser doesn't work, the plane could overshoot the runway.
We just had to be prepared for absolutely anything. In my mind, I had to say, okay, these are my exits, these are my people.
We touched down. It was a great landing.
Thank you, Lord. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Lord. Just gonna pull her around here to the fire trucks.
Flight 1380 rolls to a stop.
I knew in that moment that, okay, we made it. We survived.
But the crisis isn't over. The critically injured passenger needs urgent medical attention.
Hey, listen up, listen up.
This is the flight deck. Please stay in your seats.
Emergency equipment is pulling up. Please stay in your seats.
I really didn't have much of a sense of relief. I was still trying to maintain communications with the flight attendants as well as the crash and fire crew.
Rescuers rush onto the plane. They try to help Jennifer Reardon, but it's too late. Jennifer Reardon is the first fatality on an American airliner in more than 9 years.
With the tragic loss of one passenger, this would have been a major event. But investigative agencies look at a major failure of this nature, with or without a fatality, as being very serious.
The National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, dispatches a team to Philadelphia.
Structures team, start on that window. Come with me.
The lead investigator coordinates a team of air crash experts.
Flashlight, please.
They were quite surprised to see the amount of damage. I think it was very surprising to everyone.
Investigators quickly determine why the window in row 14 burst. The left engine close by is blown to pieces.
It almost looked as though there had been an explosion in the front of the engine. You don't typically see this sort of damage, and it was extensive.
The investigators closely examine the destroyed engine. There's no sooting in the engine, so it's clear there was no in-flight fire. It's quickly obvious to investigators what tore the engine apart.
Fan blade did this.
During normal operation, a fan at the front of the engine rotates approximately 5,000 times per minute. 24 fan blades force air backwards to feed the engine's turbines. It's a crucial part of a jet engine.
Fan at the front of the engine is responsible for 90% of the thrust of the engine.
But one of the 24 blades of the fan on the left side broke off mid-flight.
Got impact markings here.
When investigators look closely at the remains of the broken fan blade, they find markings they recognize.
You got beach marks here.
They're called beach marks because it's like the marks left by a tide on the beach. They're the most obvious things to see.
The beach marks at the base of where the fan blade broke off can only mean one thing.
This is most likely fatigue cracking. Fatigue cracking is insidious. It starts at a very small location, very small crack, and it continues to grow over time. And unless this crack is detected, it's going to lead to the failure of the part.
Get me the maintenance records for the left engine, as far back as you can go.
A metal fatigue crack on a fan blade can grow slowly over time. Airlines are supposed to make periodic checks so that no plane flies with a weakened fan blade.
Fan blades are routinely removed and inspected on all aircraft. And if they're damaged in any way, they're replaced, and they're also checked to make sure that the metal fatigue has not set in and that there's cracks. This is an ongoing process.
But a fatigue crack in a single fan blade caused catastrophic damage to Flight 1380, resulting in the death of a passenger. How could that have happened? NTSB investigators wonder if engineers were doing the proper maintenance to prevent a fan blade from breaking mid-flight.
Which blade is it?
13.
Catching a fatigue crack at an early stage is absolutely critical, because it will only get longer and longer as the engine continues operating. Eventually, the crack will become so long that the part is no longer able to hold itself together, and that's when failure occurs.
Airlines execute inspections during scheduled maintenance to look for any defects in the fan blades. Investigators study the inspection history for the fan blades in the left engine of Flight 1380.
They did a full overhaul in 2012.
Let me see.
They learned that all the fan blades, including fan blade 13, were inspected during a major overhaul in 2012, 6 years before the incident on Southwest 1380. During the overhaul, the protective coating on each of the blades is stripped. Then a fluorescent dye is used to help identify any fatigue cracking.
Fluorescent dye penetrates into the crack, and the crack is visible as a sort of thin, glowing line under ultraviolet light.
Investigators review the work orders done on the fan blades during the 2012 overhaul.
This checks out. Says they did a full inspection of blade 13.
Fan blades on this engine were overhauled in 2012, and that means they were all removed, the coatings were stripped, they were inspected, and then everything was reapplied and they were reinserted.
Investigators determined that at the time of the 2012 overhaul, all the fan blades were found to be in good condition. But how were the fan blades maintained by Southwest Airlines after the overhaul? They're supposed to be lubricated and visually inspected between 1,500 and 3,000 flights.
There's 7 more routine checks here. They're all comprehensive, all done on time.
This was the appropriate and approved maintenance process that all technicians used at that time.
If fan blade 13 was checked routinely for 6 years and passed all its inspections, investigators wonder when the crack began.
So what do you got?
Have a look.
A microscopic examination of the fracture surface might tell them more about when the metal fatigue started.
I see. The crack was growing.
A fatigue crack is a brittle fracture mechanism. The part looks perfectly good in terms of it's not deformed, it's not bent, but there's a small defect growing. During the life of these fan blades, they're subjected to stress. The engine is started up, the stress is increased to full power, the fan blade is being pulled apart as it tries to go centrifugally outward. This puts a lot of stress on the root. The engine is shut down, the stresses go away. This is one cycle of loading, and it's equatable to one flight cycle.
How long was the crack growing? Can you tell?
Yeah, let's take this up a notch. Here, look.
Using high magnifications, investigators can see tiny tracings called striations.
There's thousands of them.
The investigators determined that each striation corresponded with one flight cycle of the engine. Therefore, the number of striations matched the number of flights that had been done by the engine.
Investigators tally the striations on the fractured blade. That means counting tens of thousands of microscopic marks on a tiny piece of metal.
There's over 32,000 striations.
What's that tell you?
By counting the striations on the base of fan blade number 13, Investigators are able to date the beginnings of the crack.
This crack could have started more than 6 years ago.
It's an important development. The fatigue crack on fan blade 13 likely began before the engine overhaul in 2012, when the blades were under close inspection.
The investigators concluded that the crack was present but had been missed at its last overhaul and during the subsequent visual inspections.
The pressure on investigators mounts. There are more than 4,000 Boeing 737s in service, using the same type of fan blades. The same inspection regime that missed the growing crack is also used throughout the aviation industry. The catastrophe that struck Flight 1380 could happen again.
Once the fatigue crack has started or initiated, you could liken it to a ticking time bomb.
Investigators need to know why engineers didn't find the crack on the fan blade that caused the tragedy on Southwest 1380.
The last major inspection that was done was with a dye-penetrant check that was the approved and appropriate test at that time.
The NTSB discovers that industry regulators were slow to adopt new, more powerful technologies.
It's unfortunate that technologies existed at that time, but they weren't used, and it's arguable whether, had they been used, the crack would definitely have been picked up before failure.
Ultrasonic probes allow inspectors to detect growing fatigue cracks far more effectively.
An ultrasonic inspection shoots a sound wave into the part, and this sound wave can reflect off of any kind of defect that might be there. So this can detect internal defects as well as surface defects.
If a fatigue crack in fan blade 13 had been detected by inspectors using this new technology, the catastrophe on Flight 1380 could have been prevented.
Whether another inspection would have found the crack, it's possible, but this wasn't approved at the time and wasn't applied.
But the missed crack doesn't explain why the shattered fan blade caused so much damage to the engine.
To have a fan blade fail is not an impossible condition. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen, and typically what will occur is the engine contains it and the airplane lands normally.
The accident on Flight 1380 reveals a weakness in the Boeing 737's turbofan engines.
When the fan blade departed, it damaged the cowl latches.
There are 3 latches on the underside of the cowlings that secure it to the engine.
The latches are what maintenance needs access to work on the engine, so these cowlings will actually open up.
Investigators determined that when the 11-pound fan blade broke off, it was propelled downward, striking the underside of the latches, one of the most vulnerable places of the engine. The impact opened the cowl enough for the incoming air to rip the housing from the engine, sending shrapnel everywhere.
One of the questions was, why didn't we see this sort of failure during certification testing? This engine was certified in 1997. The computer modeling available in those days never predicted that this sort of failure could happen.
Investigators now understand what happened on Southwest Flight 1380.
Row 14, just on the right.
A small fracture in fan blade 13 had been slowly growing for more than 6 years. When Flight 1380 reaches cruising altitude, the fan blade finally breaks. It strikes a weak spot in the casing and starts a chain reaction that tears the engine apart, sending a piece of the engine cowl into the window at row 14. It causes a rapid decompression in the cabin. Jennifer Reardon, sitting in seat 14A, is sucked out the window.
It's okay. You're gonna be okay.
When I first saw our passenger out the window, it was a shock. It's not anything that I ever in a million years thought I would see.
Help me!
I said, you know, to myself, it's time to go to work. And so I positioned myself accordingly, and I had another passenger in row 15 who was assisting me. And the two of us were pulling with everything we had.
50 feet.
Years of training and experience help Captain Tammy Jo Schultz and First Officer Darren Ellisor get their badly damaged plane safely on the ground.
This entire flight crew performed extremely well. Everyone did their job and did it well. A lot of good aviation techniques, a lot of training came into play.
I definitely had a lot of anxiety from the time that the engine exploded, and it really didn't even stop once we got the airplane on the runway.
A high-pressure emergency landing saves the plane. But the accident takes Jennifer Reardon's life. The NTSB's report recommends that Boeing redesign engine cases so a detached fan blade can't cause a catastrophic accident. The aviation industry expands the use of ultrasonic testing. With the implementation of this new technology, similar incidents are averted.
Technicians found 23 fan blades that exhibited some form of potential cracking, and they were removed from service.
The skilled airmanship of Captain Tammy Jo Schultz and First Officer Darren Ellisor is recognized around the world.
We're not heroes, no. Tammy, Joe, and I we were only doing our jobs, everything that we were trained to do. I do consider the passengers and the flight attendants heroes. They put their own lives on the line. That is being a hero right there.
The actions of the flight attendants are also honored.
That day in April, it was our very last day. We were going home, so it was go home day as we call it. In my mind, that day was going to go very differently. I did what I needed to do. That day was definitely not the day that we had expected.
It's okay, you're gonna be okay.
As humans, when things are at their worst, we are at our best. The flight attendants and the passengers, when it was really the darkest of times, they rose to the occasion.
We did everything we could with what we had. There's people around us that are willing to help and want to help. You know, we're all here for a reason. And for some of us, that is to serve.
I was able to really learn about Jennifer and learn who she is as a person and learn how wonderful she is in the community and the foundation that she has in her name. The one thing that she wanted to do in this world was to spread kindness, and even though she's no longer with us, she's still doing that through other people.